Maybe you are not bored. Maybe your mind finished the pattern. You hear the same explanation again. You do the same task again. You sit through the same type of conversation again. And something inside you starts to switch off. Not slowly, almost instantly. The first time, you were interested. You wanted to understand. You paid attention. You asked questions. You tried to see how it worked. But then something changed. You began predicting what came next, the next step, the next example, sometimes even the conclusion. And once that happens, repetition can start to feel strangely empty, like your brain is saying, I already know where this is going. From the outside, that can look like impatience. But the possible high IQ connection is not boredom itself. It may be how quickly some analytical minds recognize structure and compress repeated information into a familiar pattern. Once you can predict most of what comes next, each repetition may offer less new information. Your attention drops, even though your ability has not. But here is where boredom can fool you. Recognizing a pattern is not the same as mastering it. You can understand how a skill works long before you can perform it consistently. You can understand the exercise before your body can execute it well. You can recognize the strategy before you can apply it under pressure. In other words, your mind can finish the pattern before your skill finishes developing. So the useful question is not simply, am I bored? Ask, is there truly nothing new here? Or have I understood the pattern before I have mastered the skill? Those are two very different kinds of boredom. One may be telling you that you need a harder challenge. The other may be asking you to stay long enough for understanding to become ability. That distinction is what this video is about. Reason 1. Your ability may be growing faster than the challenge. Sometimes the problem is not that you suddenly stopped caring. The activity simply stopped asking enough from you. Think about a task that once required your full attention. At the beginning, you had to concentrate. You made mistakes. You had to think through every step. But after doing it for a while, something changed. You became faster, more accurate, more comfortable. The task stayed the same. You did not, and that gap matters. Sometimes boredom begins when your ability grows faster than the challenge in front of you. This can happen in school, at work, even in hobbies you genuinely enjoy. What once demanded 80% of your attention may now require only 30%. You can still do it well, but your mind has too much unused capacity while doing it. And here is where people often make the wrong move. They assume boredom means they need something completely new. But novelty is not the only way to make something interesting again. Sometimes you need a harder version of what you are already doing. More precision, a tighter limit, a more difficult problem, greater responsibility. So before you abandon something because it feels repetitive, ask, can I raise the challenge before I replace the activity? If the work is too easy, find a harder layer. If the skill feels automatic, increase the standard. If a hobby feels flat, try something inside it that you cannot yet do well. Because there is an important difference between outgrowing an activity and simply outgrowing its current level. Sometimes your mind does not need a new road. It needs the old road to become steeper. Reason 2. Repetition that changes nothing feels like mental noise. Doing the same thing again is not always the problem. Doing it when nothing seems to change can be. Think about a weekly meeting where everyone discusses the same issue, again and again, but no decision is made. Or a task you repeat every day even though you can already see a faster way to do it. Or a conversation that keeps circling back to the same point without moving anywhere. That kind of repetition creates a different kind of boredom. Your mind is not simply saying, I need something more exciting. It may be asking, why are we spending energy if nothing is changing? Sometimes boredom is not a lack of stimulation. It is frustration with wasted motion. You can tolerate repetition surprisingly well when you understand what it is doing. But when effort goes in and nothing seems to come out, the process starts to feel like mental noise. There is an important distinction here. Not every repeated action is supposed to create something new. Some repetition maintains what already works. Exercise, bookkeeping, safety checks, daily routines. Maintenance is not the same as stagnation. So when repetition starts draining you, ask, is this maintaining something, improving something, or merely consuming time? If it maintains something important, simplify it. If it creates progress, measure that progress. But if it repeatedly consumes time without protecting, improving, or producing anything, then your boredom may be pointing to a process that deserves to change. Because sometimes the problem is not repetition itself. It is repeating something that never learns from being repeated. Reason 3. Predictability becomes draining when you lose choice. Predictability is not always what makes repetition boring. Sometimes the real problem is that nothing inside the experience is yours to decide. You already know the steps. Do this, then repeat. There is no question to answer, no decision to make, no room to change how the work gets done. And after a while, your attention begins to disappear. Not because your mind needs stress, not chaos, not constant pressure. It may simply need some sense of participation. Imagine two people doing the same repetitive job. One follows the exact same instructions every day. The other is allowed to change the order, solve problems, improve the process, and take responsibility for the result. The work may still be repetitive, but mentally, those are very different experiences. One person is only completing steps. The other is still making decisions. That distinction matters. Your mind may tolerate repetition much better when it still has something to choose. And this creates a useful alternative to constantly searching for something new. Sometimes you do not need a different task. You need more ownership inside the task you already have. So, when predictability starts draining you, ask, is this boring because I know what will happen? Or because I have no choices left inside it? If possible, create one decision point. Choose the order. Improve one step. Set your own standard. Find a better method. Take responsibility for an outcome instead of only completing instructions. Life will always contain predictable parts. The goal is not to turn every routine into an exciting puzzle. But before adding novelty, try adding ownership. Sometimes the mind wakes up again when it is allowed to participate, not just repeat. Reason 4. Something new is not always something better. Sometimes the problem is not the thing you are doing. It is how easy it is to replace boredom with something new. You start a book and enjoy it. A few chapters later, your interest drops. Then, another book suddenly looks more exciting. The same thing can happen with hobbies, projects, goals, even work. The beginning feels good because everything is new. You are curious. You want to see what happens. But once that feeling fades, you may start thinking, maybe this is not for me, so you switch. And for a while, your interest comes back. But that does not always mean the new thing is better. Sometimes it is simply new. Something new can make you interested again without helping you grow. This is where boredom can become a problem. If you leave every time the excitement drops, you may get very good at starting things, but not at finishing them. Many useful things have a boring middle, the point where progress feels slower, the point where the work becomes familiar, the point where motivation is no longer doing all the work for you. That does not mean you should never leave. Sometimes quitting is the right choice, but before you switch, ask, what will the new thing actually give me that this one cannot? If you have a clear answer, changing direction may make sense. If not, give the current thing one more checkpoint. Finish the chapter, complete the session, reach the next small goal, then decide. Because sometimes you do not need something new. You just need to stay long enough to see what happens after the exciting part is gone. Reason 5. Purpose does not always feel meaningful. Sometimes boredom starts to feel like a warning. You lose interest and immediately think, this is not for me. I am wasting my time. Maybe I should be doing something else. And sometimes that feeling is worth listening to. But not every boring day means you are on the wrong path. Think about building a business. Some days are full of ideas. Other days are invoices, emails, small corrections, and tasks nobody notices. Or think about caring for someone you love. The reason matters deeply. But not every errand, appointment, or repeated responsibility feels meaningful while you are doing it. That is the part we often forget. Purpose is not a feeling you experience every minute. Something can matter to you and still feel ordinary today. So boredom can be a signal, but it is not always the truth. Before deciding that something has lost its purpose, ask a different question. What is this boring task supporting? Maybe it keeps your business running. Maybe it protects your health. Maybe it supports a skill you still want. Maybe it helps someone you care about. If the result still matters to you, one dull day does not automatically mean the direction is wrong. And if you cannot find any reason the repetition matters anymore, that is useful information too. The goal is not to force yourself to stay forever. It is to stop judging an important path by one boring moment. A meaningful life can contain a lot of ordinary days. Sometimes purpose is not the excitement you feel while doing the work. It is the reason the work is still worth doing. Reason 6. You may be improving even when it no longer feels exciting. At the beginning of learning something, progress is easy to see. Yesterday, you could not do it. Today, you can. That difference feels exciting. But after a while, progress becomes harder to notice. You are still practicing the same movement, reviewing the same lesson, showing up when the excitement is lower. And now, the improvements are smaller. You make fewer mistakes. You finish a little faster. You need less effort to get the same result. But those changes do not feel as dramatic as the beginning. So your mind may start saying, I am not getting anywhere. That can make repetition feel pointless, even when it is still working. Think about learning an instrument. At first, playing one song feels like a huge achievement. Later, progress may mean making one transition smoother or keeping better timing. The improvement is real. It is just less obvious. This is where boredom can give you the wrong picture. You may not be stuck. You may simply have reached a stage where progress is quieter. So instead of asking only, do I still feel like I am improving? Look for evidence. Am I faster, more accurate, more consistent? Am I making mistakes I used to make less often? Compare yourself with a month ago, not with yesterday. If nothing has changed for a long time, then something may need adjusting. But if small improvements are still happening, boredom does not automatically mean you have stopped growing. Early progress is easy to notice. Later progress often hides in the details. And sometimes the repetition that feels ordinary today is quietly making tomorrow's difficult thing easier. Warning: intelligence still needs discipline. There is one warning you need to hear clearly. Getting bored quickly does not always mean you should leave. And it does not mean you should force yourself to stay either. Boredom is information, but it should not make every decision for you. Imagine you promised yourself you would practice something for 3 months. The first few weeks were easy. You had energy. You wanted to show up. Then one morning, none of that was there. The work felt dull. And suddenly the promise you made 3 weeks ago started to look like a bad decision. This is where discipline matters. Not because discipline means ignoring how you feel. It means asking whether anything important has actually changed. Is the goal no longer worth it? Has the situation changed? Did you learn something new that gives you a real reason to stop? Or are you simply bored today? Those are different things. A new fact may deserve a new decision. A temporary feeling does not always need one. This is especially important when you are used to following curiosity. Curiosity is powerful. It can lead you toward better questions and better opportunities. But curiosity is good at opening doors. It is not always good at deciding how long you should stay in the room. That requires something else: commitment. The ability to keep your word after the feeling that created the promise has changed. That does not mean staying forever. It means not renegotiating your goals every time your mood changes. So listen when boredom shows up, question it, find out what it is telling you. But do not automatically obey it. Sometimes intelligence helps you know when to change direction. Discipline helps you know when not to. And over time, keeping a promise that still matters builds something boredom cannot give you. Trust in your own word. Final thoughts. Do not build your life around avoiding boredom. If repetition bores you quickly, you do not need to turn that into a judgment about yourself. But you also do not need to obey the feeling every time it appears. There is another trap that is easy to miss. You can spend your whole life trying not to be bored. A new project, a different job, another hobby, another goal. Every change feels good for a while. Then the new thing becomes familiar too, and the search begins again. At that point, boredom is still deciding your life. It is simply making you run instead of making you stay. That is why the goal is not to create a life where nothing ever feels repetitive. That life does not exist. Even work you love has dull days. Even good relationships repeat conversations. Even meaningful goals contain tasks you would rather skip. The better question is this repetition empty, or is it building something I care about? If it is empty, something may need to change. Maybe the process can be improved. Maybe you need more challenge or more choice. And sometimes, yes, leaving is the right decision. But if the repetition is supporting something you still value, boredom alone may not be enough reason to walk away. Give yourself a little distance before deciding. Look at what the repetition is producing, not only at how it feels today. That is the difference between noticing boredom and letting boredom choose for you. A good life is not one where you never get bored. It is one where boredom no longer gets the final vote. If you have ever lost interest the moment life became repetitive, comment 8 below. You may remind someone else that getting bored quickly is something to understand, not something to judge. And if this video helped you understand your mind a little better, consider subscribing. Not for more noise. For more conversations that help you understand your mind well enough to work with it, instead of being controlled by it.